Greetings and salutations, friends. It is I, Nergling, your trusty guide for all things Old Hammer, stepping in for Arch whilst he recovers from Nurgle's rot. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the mysterious and elusive Zoats. But before we start, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring the tallyman's bell so you don't miss an update. Of course, if you so wish, you can support me too, at the link below. Now, onwards! The Zoats are an ancient reptilian race of bioengineered constructs, similar in structure to centaurs in fantasy settings. The current background material has them as originally developed by the Tyranids and incorporated into the multitudes of subservient lifeforms that serve the hive mind. The trusty Zoat is no newfangled race. In fact, their origins lie deep in the history of Games Workshop itself. Many of you may remember Rogue Trader. For those of you that don't, it was Games Workshop's first real attempt at a unified science fiction setting. A throw everything at the wall and see what stuck exercise, which turned out to be massively successful. This process introduced many races and species of creatures that were yet to be fully realised as miniatures. Some races were merely copied from other intellectual property and rebranded, whilst others were truly unique. During this chaotic period, the Tyranids were a mere glint in Games Workshop's eye, with a lone, rather disjointed-looking miniature which would later be expanded upon in various ways and provide the blueprint for the Termagants. The Tyranids truly took off a few years later with their own codex and additions such as Advanced Space Crusade and the like. It is in this infancy that we find the original Zoats, so closely aligned with the Tyranid race that Tyranid armies had to include them to some degree. Along with the even more destructive Dominators, a race of pure, unadulterated violence, the Zoats enjoyed a brief moment in the sun. We learned that Zoats were intelligent beyond the base cunning and mindless aggression of typical Tyranid creatures, capable of communicating and even reasoning with other races to an extent. The use of such alien ambassadors was seen as a good way for the hive mind to reconnoitre new species and determine how useful their incorporation into the Tyranid genome would be for the Tyranids' endless quest to further their own evolution. Despite their creation by the Tyranids, particularly strong-willed Zoats were able to escape the controlling influence of the hive mind and could pursue their own independent agendas. Eventually, the Zoats ceased to be of any use to the hive mind, and the species was eventually no longer created within the Tyranid fleets of the late 41st millennium, vanishing from Imperial records for generations. Through simple neglect, Games Workshop left the noble Zoat out of its background, and instead went about honing their armies to be more streamlined and less higgledy-piggledy in their design. A remnant of the throw everything at the wall attitude of the late 80s and early 90s. This tweaking led to the removal of many less popular lines of armies and miniatures, such as the Dominators and Squats. It is here that we leave the Zoats languishing. For more than a decade they were an unspoken evil. What rules they ever had faded into memory, and eventually, as time dragged on, they became myth and legend. It's worth noting that the internet wasn't really all that much of a thing back in the early 90s, certainly not to the extent it is today. So, the archiving of races and miniatures was done primarily by simply looking back through old codexes, manuals and rulebooks in one's own collection. Though Zoats have been observed in groups on a handful of occasions, most sightings concern single nomadic individuals, providing no evidence of a Zoat home or population centre. If the Zoats are working to some overarching common agenda, the actions of each effectively keep any such plan a mystery. All that seems to link their actions is a recurrent interest in obtaining rare technological artefacts. It is speculated that this keen interest in technology may be a search for an artefact or the means with which to battle the Tyranids themselves. although this may be a fiction by those who wish to discover the secrets of the Zoats. Certainly, though, food for thought, I think you'll agree. Although designed as a slave race, the Zoats once occupied important positions within the high fleets, with certain individuals gaining great power. Zoats are known to rebel against the Tyrannids, though rarely. The rarity of these rebellions is due to the Tyrannids secreting a special slave hormone which suppresses the Zoats' natural sense of independence. However, renegade Zoats do exist throughout the galaxy, either having broken away from the high fleets or become lost during scouting missions and have broken away from the influence of the Tyrannid slave hormone through lack of proximity. Zoats who have broken away are able to develop independent civilizations and even strong psychic powers. Approximately half of renegade and independent Zoats will develop psychic powers. Independent Zoat civilizations are very diverse, with small groups isolated from each other on widely scattered planets. Other Zoats may find themselves employed as mercenaries. However rare, Elder pirates have been known to favour Zoat mercenaries due to Elder antipathy to orcs and due to finding humans rather irksome. These mercenary Zoats, whether abandoned or escaped from their Tyrannid masters, have little choice but to fight for whoever pays best and complains least. Of note is the Zoat ability in the assimilation of information about other species' languages and psychology with stunning speed, which makes them particularly gifted in their comprehension of alien creatures. Due to this remarkable ability, the Zoat are incredibly enigmatic creatures capable of effectively subverting other species to bring them under their control. It is here that we start to see parallels with the Gene Stealer cults, rogue organisations preparing for the coming Tyrannid invasion. However, the two were never quite linked, and indeed some may say that in several instances the slavish worship of the Gene Stealer cult to the Tyrannids may have actually hindered their furtherance of their cause, a problem that would not occur if a Zoat was given the same task. The Zoats are centauroid, with two muscular rear sets of limbs ending in horny toes like that of a rhino to provide locomotion. Driven forward by their four powerful legs, a charging Zoat was like an organic battering ram of hide and muscle, their sheer speed and momentum keeping them moving forward even when mortally wounded. In hand-to-hand combat, a Zoat could crush most opponents in seconds, proving to other races the awesome power of the Tyrannids. The two manipulative and strong frontal limbs provide Zoats the means to wield a variety of weapons. Zoats may survive on almost anything, but they largely subsist on a daily diet of 3 reconstituted proteins based on woven biscuits called Zoatibix. Again, a remnant of Games Workshop's prescription to dry humour in the 80s and 90s, which I'm afraid to say is seriously lacking in today's models. Zoats also have tremendously strong and thick skin, which may actually be worn as armour by other species. Zoats are speculated to have been created purely for combat, as their stocky builds easily enable them to perform under atmospheric conditions, unlike the spacefaring Tyrannids. As such, the Zoats are probably an ancient strain of bioconstruct, as their 6-limb structure is shared with the Tyrannids and Gene Stealers. Their form is likely derived from the native creatures of the lost Tyrannid homeworld, in whatever remote galaxy they originated. Zoats make great use of all manners of biotechnology to survive in diverse environments throughout the galaxy, including augmentations to their metabolic and musculoskeletal systems. Atmospheric breather masks and synthetic organs are also used to enable the processing of alien atmospheres and the digestion of unfamiliar proteins. These diverse enhancements are added to and upgraded throughout a Zoat's long lifespan, And it is worth noting that their hereditary allows Zoats to interface with standard Tyranid biomorphs, an ability quite like any other. However, the most terrifying of these technologies are the psychic resonators through which the Zoats communicate, allowing them to implant messages telepathically, directly into the minds of others. Combined with their natural manipulative and diplomatic talents, these devices enable Zoats to install themselves as ambassadors, power brokers, and data traders on the lawless frontiers of Imperial space, such as at the Void Station in Precipice near the 7th Blackstone Fortress. Even in places where Imperial authority is stronger, Zoats have been known to spread their influence by proxy, weaving webs of coercion until they have amassed themselves considerable power. Now and then the Zoats would reappear, but only as side notes in the Tyranid codexes or the background sections of supplements. A tangential note in Codex Tyranids published in 2005 contained a reference to Centauroid aliens who could communicate telepathically as part of Hive Fleet Colossus. Rumours abounded that these alien creatures weren't so much the vanguard of the Tyranid fleets, but rather were trying to escape them. Others hinted the Tyranids had run out of use for the Zoats, perhaps preferring to use gene-stealer cults to prepare for the coming of the Hive fleets instead. Regardless, there was very little tangible Zoat evidence until 2012, when a new illustration surfaced. The stocky specimen appeared in an edition of Warhammer 40,000, with no additional information. Retrospective accounts speak of a species assumed to be Zoats, having made contact with the Imperium as early as the late 38th millennium. A Zoat was encountered by a squad of Imperial fists aboard a Tyranid hive ship of Hive Fleet Kraken. The Zoat attempted to persuade the Space Marines of the virtues of the Hive mind and to impede their progress into the Hive ship. When its attempt at subterfuge failed, it immediately charged the Imperial Fist squad before being killed. The Zoat-like colossi of Hive Fleet Colossus were first reported to have entered the galaxy from the eastern fringe, and in the late 38th millennium was sighted in the Ultima Segmentum, and then again as far into the galaxy as the Segmentum Tempestus. Claiming to be escaped slaves of some unknown oppressor, these colossi were unique in their ability to communicate telepathically and arm themselves with Tyranid weaponry. Due to their frequent contact with other alien races and their attempts to settle into Imperial space, the colossi were declared Xenos Horribilis in the early 39th millennium. As the Imperium started their purge, the colossi turned on the Imperial forces and were supposedly destroyed in the 226th year of the 39th millennium, at the end of the Zoroastra-Attila Wars. Then again, in the 897th year of the 41st millennium, the Space Wolves engaged the forces of a resurgent Hive Fleet Colossus as it attacked the civilized world of Thresiax. The plot thickens. Eventually, as the Tyranids became a more common sight in the Milky Way galaxy after the invasion of Hive Fleet Behemoth in the late 41st millennium, the Zoats were no longer seen outside the ranks of the Tyranids. Their sightings became less and less frequent, and they appear to have been entirely absent from the assault by Hive Fleet Leviathan in the 997th year of the 41st millennium. By the dawn of the era Indomitus, in the early 42nd millennium, the Zoats had been all but absent from the galaxy 4 generations. At the Void Station Precipice, this all changed. The Zoat known as the Archivist made itself known to Imperial agents prior to a mission into the nearby 7th Blackstone Fortress. Even amongst the diverse population of Precipice, the creature stood out, its large reptilian body and biotechnological augmentations unlike anything else seen on the station. Presenting itself as a data trader, the Archivist approached a group of explorers, offering an opportunity to quell the roiling chaos in an area of the Blackstone Fortress known as the Seethe, a barely navigable region of constantly shifting matter. There the Archivist had identified fragments of an ancient Zoat spacecraft and, ever driven by the desire for precious archaeotech, had resolved to salvage the remnants of the vessel before they were lost to the churning maelstrom. Crucial to its plan was another Zoat relic, the Grail Intulia, which would give its bearer a measure of control over the sea's riotous turbulence and grant access to areas otherwise impassable. Once the remains of the Zoat ship had been reclaimed with the explorer's aid, the Archivist pledged that it would calm the upheaval of the seas permanently. In truth, the Archivist's proposals were just one facet of a much wider manipulation that affected many different exploring parties on Precipice and prompted several ventures into the Blackstone Fortress, some successful, others disastrous. Once the duplicitous Zoat had stockpiled a large personal cache of artifacts, it disappeared, leaving many promises unfulfilled, and many hapless allies trapped in the maddening depths of the fortress. The Archivist now roams as a free agent, capitalizing on the laxity of regional authorities and salvaging relics amidst the anarchy that has proliferated in the age of the Cicatrix Maledictum. Wherever it encounters the operatives of other intelligent species, the Zoat draws upon all of its technology and intellect to disrupt their activities or mould them to its purposes, particularly when rare ancient technology is at stake. Those the Archivist cannot coerce in this way soon find themselves facing much more hostile methods. So, as we draw to a close, we come to the conclusion that the Zoats are probably one of the most mysterious and enigmatic races in Warhammer 40,000. The very fact that they were left to fester for so long yet received odd mentions here and there throughout the history of the universe makes them all the more elusive. Their threadbare and sometimes conflicting background information allows us to assume lots and know very little. Maybe this is the allure of them, as we can imprint onto them what we have interpreted ourselves, all the while unknowingly being manipulated by them for their own incomprehensible intent. I hope you enjoyed this guest video. Be sure to comment, like and subscribe, and thanks very much for watching. I have been Nergling, your trusty guide for all things Oldhammer, and I bid you good day.